Welcome back to Deep Truth Revealed. And the subject is, how can we tell if the things that are preached or taught are true? We're going to use for scripture we're going to come from is going to be Genesis chapter 1. We're only going to focus on basically verses chapter 1, verses 1 through 5. I'm going to talk about some things that I have heard when I was coming up in church, and particularly after I was called, that I see happening. And this type of teaching is called assumption teaching. And here's what I mean. Here we go. This is Genesis chapter 1, verses 1 and 2. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the water. Now, I've heard ministers say that God doesn't do anything in part, or He doesn't do anything halfway. He doesn't create something all jacked up and messed up. God's work is complete and perfect from the beginning. Honestly, that is assumption, because there's no scripture that actually says that. Even in this text, which we're about to look at, I'm going to show you where that assumption is actually rebuked. Let's look at it. This is verse 3, 4, and 5. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw the light that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. Okay? Now, He said He divided it. So if He divided it from the darkness, that means when He first created it, it was with the darkness. It was intermingled. So it was intermingled. It wasn't separated. He divided it. So if He is dividing it when He first created it, that means it was, if you will, for lack of a better term, it was created in a chaotic state. And actually, it really is not chaotic only from a natural perspective. From God's perspective, it was created in a perfect state of peace and of unity. Okay? However, God, knowing all things, know that that state could not remain. But this is the realm in which God has ordained for right and wrong, good and evil, light and darkness to dwell. So therefore, and it dwells together. On earth we have righteousness and unrighteousness. We got a good and evil. It dwells together on earth. So this is the realm that God created those things to dwell on. But that's one scripture which in the text shows you God's ways. So it doesn't show you that God created light and it was instantly separated from the darkness. He divided it. But first He created it within. Now let's go back to Genesis chapter 1, verses 1 and 2 again. It says, "In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void." Now, some people will say and have said that this was happened by a satanic flood. It is called the fall of Satan is another one. They call it Satan, the deluge of Satan. Okay, but and they use to support this is taken from Jeremiah chapter 4 and starting at verse 23. It reads as follows: "I beheld the earth, and lo, it was without form and void, and the heavens, and they had no light. I beheld the mountains, and lo, they trembled, and all the hills moved lightly. I beheld, and lo, there was no man, and all the birds of heaven fled. I beheld, and lo, the fruitful places was a wilderness, and all the cities thereof were broken down at the presence of the Lord and at His furious anger." So they use this scripture to plug in between Genesis chapter 1 and chapter 2, chapter 1, verse 1 and 2, and say that there was a chaotic place, there was something that took place that made the earth without form and void. Now, in order to confirm this, because that teaching is out there, you need to know how to search the scripture to see if what is said is true. Now, we shall do just that. Remembering that God's ways is not man's ways, neither is His thoughts man's thoughts. This is written of in Isaiah chapter 55, by the way, verses 8 and 9. But let's look at this point. Proverbs chapter 8. Proverbs chapter 8, we have wisdom speaking. And we're going to go right into what he has to say. In this case, wisdom is called she. And we'll get into that, why God is referred to as a he and a she. Because he is genderless. He's a spirit. But anyway, this is Proverbs chapter 8. And we're going to go, I would recommend you read 8:22 through 31. We're going to start at 24. No, we're going to start at 22 and then we're going to go to 24. The Lord possessed me in the beginning of his way, before his works of old. I was set up from everlasting, from the beginning, or even the earth was. When there was no depths, I was brought forth. When there was no fountains abounding with water. Before the mountains were settled, before the hills was I brought forth. So here he says the mountains were settled. Well, if they were settled, that means that they were set in place. They were designed and they were set in place. And when they were designed and set in place, they were settled there. But then he says before the hills. So they were showing an order here. When God created the heavens and the earth, he created it, but then he formed it. He fashioned it, just like man. Okay? So, going on, this is verse 26. While as yet he had not made the earth, okay? Nor the fields, nor the highest parts of the dust of the world. What are the highest parts of the dust of the world? Mountains. So he had not made them. See, so we're showing here in Proverbs, we're seeing clearly that there's an order to God's creation. He just doesn't speak and boom, everything is there. That's not how he operates. Okay? Everything is there, but it's there in the state that he designs it, that he can measure it out, weigh it out, command the waters not to proceed, so forth, and so on. Verse 27. When he prepared the heavens, I was there. When he set a compass on the face of the depths. When he established the clouds above. When he strengthened the fountains of the deep. When he gave to the sea his decree that the water should not pass his command. When he appointed the foundation of the earth. Do you see the details here? It's showing us that there's an order here. God is establishing this. He's setting forth that. He gave the sea a command not to pass the shoreline. He just didn't boom and it was there. He just didn't say earth and then the earth was totally perfect and the mountains and the hills were there and settled and the deserts and the valleys. That's not what he did. He formed and he fashioned it. God is a master craftsman. He formed and fashioned it. And in fact, let's look at this. Another place, and this is searching the scripture. First place is Proverbs 8:22 through 31. We see where it mentions how God created the heavens, or manifested or formed the earth. It was without form. Then he gave it a form, but he created it first. And he created it in the waters that he had created. This is Job chapter 38. And this is the Lord actually speaking to Job. This is Job chapter 38, verses 1 through 7. Starting at verse 1. Then the Lord answered Job out of a whirlwind and said, Who is this that darkeneth counsel by words without knowledge? Gird up your loins now, gird up your loins like a man, for I will demand of thee, answer thou me. Where was thou when I laid the foundation of the earth? Declare if you understand it. So God said he laid the foundation of the earth. Said he laid it. Who have laid the measure thereof? Who have laid the measure thereof, if thou knowest? Or who have stretched the line upon it? Upon whereupon all the foundations thereof fastened? Who has laid the cornerstone thereof? When the morning stars sang together, and all the sons of God shouted for joy. Okay, God said then here, he says that there's a line of measurements to the earth's foundation. He says here that he asked Job who stretched out this line upon this foundation. He says, whereupon all the foundations fastened. See, so there was a building, a constructing, a forming of this which he had created. He created everything in an instant. When he created the earth, he created everything there, but not in order. He provided all the materials that he would need, is what he did. But he did not do it in order. Another place we can see this is Isaiah chapter 40. This is Isaiah chapter 40, and starting at verse 12. It says, whom have measured the waters in the hollows of his hand, and knit out the heavens in a span. Now you look this up. He measured the waters in the hollow of his hand. He measured it. It's the Lord that did this. And then the heavens in the span. This is a span. It's the span of your hand. It's the span of his hand that he measured the heavens. This is what the Lord did. It says here, going on, and comprehended the dust of the earth in the measure. He comprehended the dust of the earth. Do you know what it means to comprehend something in a measure? It means that you measure it out, you balance it out, you scale it, you weigh it. He comprehended the weight of the dust. Okay? Then he goes on, of the earth in a measure, and weighed the mountains in a scale. So he made the mountains weigh a certain amount, and he did it in his scale. He had a scale that he weighed the mountains, and the hills in a balance. And he put the hills in a balance. A balance is actually a scale that balances it out. Anyway, who have directed the Spirit of God, or the Lord, or being his counselor have taught him. See, God did these things. He just didn't make the mountains appear. He weighed them in a scale. You know, he measured the water in the hollow of his hand. He measured the skies in the span of his hand. This is what God did. This is how he created and made things, the heavens and the earth. This is what he did. Now, is there any way we can confirm this? I mean, that confirms it, but then there's confirmation. Let's look at it. The confirmation is right back where we started. Here we are. We're back at Genesis chapter 1, starting at verse 6. It says, and God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the water, and let it divide the waters from the waters. And God made a firmament, and divided the waters which are under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament, and it was so. And God called the firmament heaven. And the evening and the morning was the second day. So on the second day, God caused the water to separate from the waters, and he put waters outside of what we know as heaven, and then he had other waters under the heaven. And later we will see, he says, as a matter of fact, let's go to it, verse 9. And God said, let the waters under heaven be gathered together unto one place. See, so the water was everywhere. But then he said, let the waters be gathered under one place. You see the process of God creating. So this belief that there was a great destruction that happened between Genesis 1, verse 1, Genesis chapter 1, verse 1 and verse 2 is just assumption. It's not true. But we can search the scriptures to find out if it's true. When we hear something, know how to search the scriptures. Go look at those subjects. Does God describe how he measured the earth? Did God describe how he created the earth? Does God describe anywhere in the scriptures? So I recommend what you do is you get a strong concordance, and that way you'll be able to look up foundation, and then you can find the foundation of the earth, and you read that text. Then you'll be other things where you can read where God fashioned and He formed, and that lets you know exactly what He did. The scriptures are true. Let no man deceive you. Peace.